I am Avery Erzstein. I am the head of capital formation and investor relations at FF Venture Capital, which is where I work. I'm a partner that is responsible for raising our seventh seed stage investment fund. It's been investing in seed stage technology companies for 16 years now. We just celebrated our 16th year anniversary 2 days ago. We've deployed capital into seed stage companies via 6 funds prior to today. John Frankel is the founding partner of the firm. Alex Katz is his sort of co-founding partner. Oliver Mitchell is another partner, and I round out the U.S. New York partnership. Like I said, the firm's been around for 16 years, 6 prior funds, and with the 6th having wrapped up, we're now raising our 7th. It's going to be our flagship institutional capital seed stage fund. It's going to be larger than our prior 6, and going to be doing the same wonderful, exciting, and successful investment work that he's been doing for 16 years. Throughout my career, right, you have to remember I've been raising capital for my entire financial services career. So when I came out of business school on Wall Street, the first job out of B school was to raise capital and then construct portfolios and deploy that capital. So we were always looking for large investors, right? Investors with significant amounts of liquid capital to deploy into numerous strategies that they were going to invest in order to achieve a return. Now, each of the firms that I worked in, there were some clients in place, but the reason they were hiring you was to significantly expand the base of clients. In other words, build that book out and acquire new clients from competitive platforms, et cetera. There were a number of tools that each one of them used. In some cases, they were homegrown. In some cases, they were off the shelf. In other cases, they were like, B2B SaaS products where it was like a cloud-based solution. And then there was like this hodgepodge of all of them that you would use on a daily basis to try and find new opportunity being investors. So I became extraordinarily proficient at doing that, which is why I was ultimately asked to lead capital raising for funds. It's interesting. In so doing, I have seen, I would probably say, 2-3 dozen products across the lifespan of my career that I interacted with extensively to accomplish my objectives, to do my job every day, and or to try and accelerate how quickly I can acquire introductions to new potential investors. And I have to say, most of them fell short. And they fell short for very specific reasons that I thought as a technologist should have been relatively easy to solve, but just nobody was solving them. And when I was introduced to your platform, and again, full disclosure, you're a portfolio company. It just happened to be very synergistic that we ended up, bumping into each other in this way. It was such a breath of fresh air to see what you had put together, because you had essentially solved for everything that I had always wanted to have at my fingertips. And my impression of it was, holy cow, he's got it. Like, this guy got the product right. Now all he has to do is scale this thing, acquire users, and you just have a blockbuster product on your hand. That was my impression. What was evident was that whoever built this had done it, because that's the challenge, right? The challenge is, like, when you're out there trying to raise capital, what's the first thing you have to do? You have to identify your investor universe, right? Now, once you do that, you have to segment it, right? If your investor universe is blah, you then have to segment it into, like, okay, within that universe, there's different segments: family offices, endowments, foundations, public pensions, private pensions, sovereign wealth funds, corporate venture capital. There's all these different pools of capital out there, and you have to segment those. Now, once you segment them, you have to find a way to actually get names, people, actual individuals that you can reach out to in each one of those segments. And you need good, high quality contact information for them. And then, to the point that you made, you need to be able to manage a process, right? Like, a little bit of gray hair at this point, so you have to forgive me. I forgot what it was when I learned it, but I remember learning at one point, like, when I was in business school, we were studying, human psychology, behavioral dynamics, et cetera. And there was this class we were talking about, like, the science had studied just how many relationships a human entity, like us as a biological creature with, mushy stuff in our head, how many we could really keep track of. And it was actually a very small number. And when you start to do the math on what you have to manage as somebody raising capital, You need to have all these segments. In each segment, there's got to be hundreds of targets. In each target, there's dozens of names. And then as each one of those becomes an opportunity, you have to track where they are in a pipeline of like 10 to 12 steps. So when you start to do the math on it, you literally need to keep track of thousands of variables in order to be able to manage this process effectively. And the tool set to do so was just so woefully lacking that it just makes it really difficult. So when I interacted with your platform, the light bulb that went off was like, holy smokes, this guy did it. Like he addressed all of them. He addressed finding, which is one of the biggest parts, finding the prospective investor, identifying them, getting their contact information, putting them into like a funnel, right? Your sales funnel, putting them into a pipeline, managing that pipeline, following up the pipeline, and driving it all the way through to converting them into an investor. It's all right there in one place. And I think that's the blockbuster difference about your platform versus many others that I've interacted with, used, paid for, and whatnot. Yeah. Your platform has an incredibly large sample size of prospective investors to work with as a starting point for a capital raise. Now, I think I'm not speaking about my personal experience with your data. My personal experience with your data was that it was good, right? I think that the challenge that any company has, right, and there are other providers out there, we all know who they are, right? The challenge that these companies have, that your company is now going to have, and it's, I think, one of the biggest challenges that you're going to have to not overcome because your data is great, but manage, is data gets stale. People move, right? So somebody's email address today may not be their email address tomorrow. And as people move, this becomes the data integrity challenge because, it's the old, I said I started my career as an engineer. It's the old engineering garbage in, garbage out. Like if you program poorly, you have bugs and garbage, right? So if you get bad data into your platform from the perspective of potential LPs, you're just going to have the client, the user will have a bad experience because you get NDRs, you get no responses, you get failed campaigns. So the challenge is to maintain that really well. I was impressed with your data. We did get a number of meetings out of it. I don't want to address like how many conversions we've had, et cetera, because these things, I just got my hands, dirty with the data in recent times. And as we all know, driving that through a pipeline of, multiple conversations, multiple meetings, and into a close takes a certain number of months. But I would say that, yeah, I found the data to be extraordinarily high value, and something that we were very happy that we were able to use in a partnership with a portfolio company that we had a relationship with. To the audience, I wasn't paid for this. And I might benefit if this becomes a $1 billion portfolio company a little bit, but that notwithstanding, I don't like to mislead people. So I say this genuinely. The answer to the question, first and foremost, would be use your product. Like, you have a great product. And I would say, first and foremost, check out Fundingstack, get familiar with it, get your demo, play with it, and compare it to the other tools. Because I can tell you, you're going to find this, if you're running a process correctly, you're going to find this to be a really valuable tool to leverage and to drive your process through. Now, I use the word process a lot. So to answer your question, tips for people in my role. So this is something I actually really enjoy talking about because I've been doing this a very long time. And you learn a lot when you do something for a long time. And one of the things I've learned is that what this role comes down to is not about your personal Rolodex. And that's why what you're doing and what you're providing is so important. It's not about your personal Rolodex, which is important, right? If you have an unbelievably high quality one where just people are going to cut checks to you all the time just because you say so. But when you're in the business long enough, you discover that there's only so much utility in that Rolodex and they're only going to cut so many checks. And so at some point, you need to figure out how to get more investors. There are multiple ways that people do that. They go to conferences, they try tools, they try databases. The point is, you need a process, and that process has to deliver for you. So the tips that I would give are, get the right tool set in place from the outset. It's going to save you a ton of time, energy, money, and pain. I think your tool happens to be that answer. From there, put your process together correctly. Segment your investor populations into the right segments that are appropriate for your product. So if you're selling product A and it's not potentially a fit for like a public pension, don't even bother with them. figure out who is your target investor, and then make sure that you can get as much data on that target investor universe as you can, like through using your platform. Say, okay, family offices are my target investor. Terrific. Fundingstack has a gangbusters database of family offices that I can reach out to. The next thing I would say is be very careful and deliberate about how you reach out to these contacts, because I view them a little bit as like what people view like, chips, right? Everyone says like, oh, like in life and in business and in the world, like you get these chips that you can play, right? Well, you can only play a chip once, right? It's like the old expression in the gambling world, right? You play that chip, it's gone. So when you reach out to an investor, you've played a chip with them, you've tried. And if your outreach was either poorly targeted, irrelevant, not well crafted, or in some other way not optimized, you're not going to get a response, and therefore not going to get a meeting, and therefore have lost the potential conversion. So a big tip I would give people is think about when you do that, you segment it, you get your family offices, you're working on Fundingstack, you get this big database, craft your campaign correctly, and then make sure that you're crafting the follow-up in that campaign correctly. Just structure your pipeline really well. How do you go from step A to step B and step C all the way through till close? Those are some of the tips I think I would give. And then from there, just I think one of the most valuable things to do is, again, going back to this, beating everyone over the head with it, have a tool that's going to remind you to follow up, follow up, follow up. Once you have conversations going, everyone's inundated with electronic communications today. We get emails nonstop, text messages, WhatsApp messages, Telegram messages, pop-ups on our phones, alerts, red dots. I mean, we're just like completely overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So you have to have a platform and a tool set that puts a systematic structure in place to reminding you to follow up, right? That's a big one.